So the NBA has started, football, soccer has started, tennis has started, even the Tour de France is running right now. So when is badminton gonna start? And is this long break gonna hurt the sport? Hey guys, I'm Badminton Becky, an American living and playing badminton in China. Please hit the subscribe button and follow along as I talk about all things badminton and try to be a top player in my city. Okay, now I'm sure you've heard like the Thomas and Uber Cups were canceled due to lack of participation. The Denmark Masters was canceled as well. They are having the Denmark Open next month, and then there won't be anything until it's called the Asian Series, which will be held in Thailand. There will be 3 events. Including the World Tour Finals in January. So other sports have started, but badminton is still having a really hard time. And I've seen a lot of complaints online, Reddit, on Badminton Central, even comments on like Victor Axelson's videos. Why isn't badminton starting? And this is gonna really hurt the sport. But I think there's something that Westerners don't understand. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I am no fan of the BWF. I think they do a really bad job at kind of modernizing and promoting the sport to find fans outside of badminton. And, you know, I think things like the air shuttle was a huge waste of money, time, resources that frankly, they don't have enough to waste. So I am not at all a fan of the BWF, but I actually agree with them in this case. If you take NBA as an example, the NBA is in one country. They got to go to a bubble. They have their own hotel where all the players and the refs and the coaches and the nutritionists, they all stay. They were all there weeks early. They got 4 COVID tests and they play in the same stadium and they don't move around. Tennis is the same, like the US Open. They went early. They're only allowed to bring, like one player is allowed to bring one person. They usually have, you know, a coach, nutritionist, PT, massage therapist, but they're only allowed to bring one person. They're all staying at a hotel right near the arena. There's no fans watching, and they're there playing for 2 weeks. Badminton has not ever been like that. Like right now, the normal schedule, let me see, the normal schedule in October, it would be the Danish Open, the French Open, the Macau Open. November would be the China Open, Hong Kong Open, and Korean Masters. December would be the World Tour Finals in China. January would have a Thailand Open, Malaysian Masters, Indonesian Open. So in 4 months, you are looking at 10 different countries. 10 countries in 4 months. Now, I think that's awesome for badminton in general. I love how badminton is such an international sport, but badminton just can't operate like that right now. And I'm not talking about just being scared about COVID and getting sick. Obviously, it's the BWF's responsibility if they hold these things to keep the players safe. The issue is the international travel. A lot of Westerners don't understand how difficult it is to travel around the world. So for instance, if there was the Korean Open, the rules for Korea, you have to have a 2-week mandatory quarantine in a government supervised location, which is a designated hotel. You get off the plane, they bring you to the hotel, you're stuck in the room for 2 weeks. You can only come out after. Food is delivered to your hotel room and you get, you know, some choice like a chicken, fish, or vegetarian options, but you don't get the nutrition and the health that professional athletes need. The badminton schedule is so furious and so fast, there's not enough time. Players can't quarantine for 2 weeks. They are not allowed out of their hotel room. They would not be able to train for 2 weeks. And when they finish playing, a lot of the athletes from Asian countries especially, when they go back home, they insist on another 2-week mandatory supervised quarantine. So you're looking at one competition, which in the badminton world, if you win, you play for 4 days. You're looking at 1 month locked in a hotel room for one competition. I totally understand why teams and athletes are not willing to do that. If a competition was huge, you know, like the Tour de France, it happens once a year, it can make or break a player. I understand that you would give up maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks of your life for that. But badminton's not like that. There are obviously the World Tour Finals are very exciting, the World Championships are very exciting, and the Olympics would be worth giving up that much time. But, you know, Is the Hong Kong Open worth giving up 1 month of your life where you're stuck in a hotel room and you can't train, you can't see your family, you can't see your friends, you can't control your nutrition? Of course, the Hong Kong Open's not worth it. The China Open's not worth it. The Denmark Open is not worth it. Individually, these competitions are not the biggest things that athletes prepare for all year long. There are just constantly new ones. So of course an athlete can't give up a month of their freedom just for one Hong Kong Open. But you could say, well, let the athlete decide. You know, it's not fair to just cancel it and not even give the athlete a choice. And that's true, but I don't think it's the BWF controlling it. Countries in Asia are very serious, like China. China has virtually controlled the virus in the country. I think we went something like 28 days with no cases in the country. The only cases are people who arrive from other countries who are found to be sick in their mandatory, supervised, closed quarantine. China itself has not allowed competitions in the country. This year, China was set to have quite a few large international competitions, and all of them have been canceled. It's not because of the sports associations, it's not because of the player, it's because of the Chinese government. We haven't had a second wave, and China is very, very, very nervous and guarding against preventing a second wave. Let me read you an article. There has been one major sports event that has been allowed in China, and it's the League of Legends video game competition. I know it sounds crazy, but they've canceled like the World Golf Championships. They've canceled the Rolex Shanghai Masters tennis tournament, but they are going on with the League of Legends esports, they call them esports, world competition. And to have this competition going, the organizers have actually been in touch with the Chinese government for about 6 months. And these are the precautions that the Chinese government insisted they take before the players could come. Okay, I'm gonna read an article. This is from Sixth Tone. It is a Chinese media company that writes in English. I'm gonna start in the middle of the article. Okay, in late June, that's when the work really started. Over the next few months, Riot Games, they're the organizers, had to coordinate its plans with local government to ensure that everything compiled with virus control measures, while also arranging entry visas, transport, and hotel quarantine for 22 teams from countries around the world, each with a different COVID-19 situation. For Zhang and the other organizers, workdays sometimes lasted from 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. the next morning, as the team spanned different time zones, and checking every country's COVID-19 infection data became a bedtime and wake-up ritual. The first athletes began arriving in China in September. This competition started at the end of September. The athletes arrived in the beginning of September. They spent their mandatory 14-day quarantine at a hotel that had been specifically equipped with powerful PCs so they could keep match sharp for the tournament. Not everything went according to plan, however. The Vietnamese squads from Team Flash and Game Esports couldn't make the tournament because they wouldn't be able to return to their home country after competing due to domestic entry restrictions. So if these athletes left their country, they could not return in Vietnam. Many of the athletes have arrived from countries experiencing high numbers of COVID-19 infections. Several spent their entire flights in hazmat suits, without eating or drinking, as they traveled up to 30 hours due to long layovers. So that's what they had to do to get permission to have a competition in China. The athletes literally had to wear full PPE masks. They couldn't take them off to eat or drink for up to 30 hours to keep themselves safe. So how can badminton athletes do that? How can badminton athletes who do sometimes have to travel 30 hours, you know? The Europeans, when they come to Asia, they have to travel for a huge, long amount of time. And then the Asians, when they go to Europe, it's also huge, long-haul flights. It's impossible. It's impossible to keep anything close to the similar schedule that the BWF had last year, just solely because of visa and quarantine restrictions. Not because the BWF is being selfish, not because the BWF is trying to protect the athletes from COVID. It's just a legal visa quarantine issue right now that countries are not willing to overlook. Gronya Somerville in Team Australia, she said as much on her Instagram or Facebook. She said that's the reason why Team Australia actually dropped out of the Thomas and Uber Cups, because they would have to do a 2-week quarantine when they came back to Australia, and it cost a person $3,000. A lot of athletes, in countries like Australia, they don't have a lot of support. So they would have to pay for that themselves, and that is too much money. Or she said they could have stayed in Europe, but then that's even more money, So there's just kind of no good answer. If the BWF went ahead, the powerful teams, the teams with money like China, Japan, Korea, they might be able to work something out. They have the resources, they have the money where they could, maybe get things in the hotel room for their athletes, where they could get the proper nutrition to their athletes during a quarantine period. They could have, trainers and coaches that coach them every day on video. But not every team has that, and that's really unfair. If the BWF insisted, it would really give an advantage to the big teams with lots of money. Teams like England, they barely have enough money for coaches. And especially teams like, USA, Canada, they do it all by themselves already. And to have this extra barrier is really unfair right now and unnecessary. So I actually think creating an Asian series in one place where the athletes will stay and compete for several weeks is the right thing to do. And I know some people complained about badminton dying, that because we're not having these games and other sports are, is this the death of badminton? I know Anders Antonsen on his Instagram, he wrote, "So what's the plan here? Are we sitting around waiting for a vaccine to come before badminton can start up again? I see tennis is playing in New York these days, at BWF official. It's time to step up. Make the best and safest setup you possibly can and run the tournament. Whoever attends, attends. Otherwise, the sport will wither away and die." And I know he was also very upset when they announced the Asian tournament, or the Asian leg of the tournament, which will be in January, which means that November, December won't have any games. But again, I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, athletes can stay home, they can practice, they can prepare, and then they can come and stay in Thailand for several weeks, and they can arrive early, and they can do all their quarantine. Also, like Anders says, the sport will wither away and die. This is where the unpopularity of badminton really is an advantage. People that watch badminton play badminton. People that watch the pros and know the pros, it's because they love badminton as a sport. Badminton is not a sport where there are a lot of fans that don't play badminton. It's not like the NBA, which has, millions of fans that have never played basketball. Badminton has a very small amount of fans, and everybody that is a fan of badminton plays badminton. Almost everybody. Okay, maybe there's one person, but let's be honest, if you watch pro players, you are or were a badminton player. Badminton players, we're not going to abandon the sport just because we didn't see it on our computers for a couple months. First off, a lot of people, it's really hard for them to even watch the competitions live because it's geo-blocked on YouTube, so not every country can see it, and it's certainly not broadcast on most TVs. It is broadcast here in China. But I know in a lot of countries you cannot find it on TV anywhere. Also the sponsors, the sponsors are not in badminton for the huge audiences, okay? The sponsors who support badminton have supported it for a very specific reason. So these advertisers, they're not gonna go away. They're gonna wait till the sports come back, and then they'll start sponsoring it again, because badminton won't lose a huge fan base if it's not on TV. If you look on Reddit or Badminton Central, or your feelings right now are, you can't wait for it to start. You can't wait to go back to the court and play. Like, you're not gonna lose interest in badminton because you can't play it for half a year and you can't watch it. It's just not that popular. I'm sorry to say. The people that support it will support it through thick and thin. So I really think that is not at all a concern about any of this. The big concern is the visas and legal travel restrictions. So I do think the BWF is right in trying to just make an Asian leg in one country at one time. Sure, maybe we'll go another extra 2 months without any badminton competitions, but then we'll have 3 in 3 weeks. So I feel like that's really the best way to deal with the COVID situation right now. Like, if they did a European league where they just played games in Europe for 3 to 4 weeks, and then several months later, they did an Asian league where they just played games in Asia for 3 or 4 weeks. I think that is maybe the fairest solution, where they could create a bubble. they could have all the players come, because giving up 2 weeks in a mandatory quarantine is more worth it if you're playing for 3 weeks before. It's not worth it if you're playing for 2 or 3 days. So if they do something like that, if they make it more like the NBA or even like the tennis tournament, where it was longer playing in one place so that they could meet the COVID restrictions of these countries, I think that would be fair. So I actually don't blame the BWF on this one. It's really up to the countries. Countries are just not allowing major competitions, or if they allow them, there are a huge number of restrictions and there's a huge number of requirements that an organization small like the BWF can't match. So that's my take on all this. Being in Asia, I know how difficult it is to live here. I mean, I have coworkers who are legal, they have visas, they have jobs, they have family in China. They literally have children in China, and they cannot enter China because that's how strict it is to get into China. I have a friend, an American guy, who's married to a Chinese girl. His wife had a baby, and he hasn't even seen his baby for more than 6 months because he's been locked outside the country. So what do you think? You totally disagree with me? Do you think the BWF is being crazy for canceling these tournaments, and you think that they should start them up again for the good of the sport? Do you think badminton is going to wither and die like Anders Anderson thinks? Let me know in the comments below. We can fight about it if you disagree with me. Living here in Asia, I just have a different perspective than I think most Westerners, because I haven't even left Xiamen City in 9 months, because if I go outside the province, I will need to do another COVID test. And I've already done 7 with no symptoms, so I'm tired of doing COVID tests. So that's my take on it. Let me know if you agree or disagree or whatever in the comments, and I will see you next time on the court. Bye.